Hi everyone, we are back with the next talk, which is around GIS and GeoAI. This will be taken by Amandeep, who has over 20 years of working in tech industry. He has worked across a lot of different verticals, GIS being one of them, apart from touching upon finance, telecom, automotive, manufacturing, and services. He has worked with very large scale, complex enterprise grade problems, and he was also awarded as CIO and leader for Next 100 CIO Award in 2017 for his work in 20 for his work in overall tech industry and overall leadership. So over to you, Amandeep.
All right. Thanks for the introduction, Akash. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes,
Yes,
we are
yes,
good. Yes, we are
lo-
good.
All
We are
right.
all.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Amandeep, and focus of my talk would be the field of GIS and Geo AI, which is nothing but amalgamation of GIS and artificial intelligence. So, why we are talking about GIS now, and more so, why we are talking about artificial intelligence? So, if we look at this picture, this gives us a feeling of the ecosystem that we are living in right now. So a 20,000 feet view of this picture tells me that everything that is there in the world has an address. So apart from we human being, of course, we also have our own address mechanism. But things that we use, things that we interact with, they come with some kind of unique identity and unique address in this world. Whether we are talking about public works, utilities, we are talking about transit systems like metro, buses, or trains, or of course, airplanes, or we are talking about smart homes, smart vehicles, etc. So all of these come with tiny to big machines, big sensors that has its own address, and they emit data. So these two things are what makes it candidate for GIS. So since there is a location, we can apply GIS technology, and since there is data, we can apply artificial intelligence. So that is what focus of next about 45-50 minutes would be. We are going to take a survey of what is GIS, what GIS technology and platform is, how it solves some business and social questions. Then we'll dive into the world of GIS and machine learning, and finally talking about artificial intelligence by means of deep learning. We will talk about how those technologies are helping the world of GIS and to make this new world called Geo AI. Let's begin. So, to start with the first question for uh, a newcomer in this field is what really is geospatial? So, geospatial is nothing but your normal data. So, if you have this kind of two-dimensional data where the features are names, jurisdiction name, and location, which is your street address, this is your regular data. I can say this is also geospatial data because there is address. But in order to make it understand by machines, we need to have numeric location. So, which means 401 East 5th Street should be converted to lat long, which is X, Y column. So, I have added these two to make it a spatial data. Now, there are many ways to handle this spatial data. We can do modeling, we can visualize this, and the visualization is the best tool to understand our data. So those who have experience working on machine learning, the first thing after gathering the data, collecting the data is something called as EDA. So we do EDA to understand spread of our data, to understand the statistical mechanisms behind our data and all that stuff. So, which means for spatial data as well, there are means to visualize the data, and the best mean to visualize spatial data is a map. So we had this data, we converted this into a spatial data, and then we project these 9 addresses on a map to get this kind of a data. Now you would see that it is making much more sense on what this data is about, and we say that this data is in or around Austin, and there are some suburbs, and there is a location where most of these addresses are stored. This is the biggest cluster over here, so we can make all kind of sense out of this data and answer some simple to complex questions. Now, real world, when we talk about real world is really a map. So if we take a city, or if we take a street within our city, to exploding it to geography, that is the world. So everything is a map. So which means that the real physical world is represented as a map, but a map is represented by something called as a raster and a vector. So this is the mechanism under the hood that makes the GIS map. So don't worry, we'll talk about raster and vector in a good detail in coming slides. But I just wanted to give you a picture that where we are coming from. We are coming from an era where mapping was used to find direction. Two, we are using maps to understand the natural phenomena, to understand the category phenomena, to understand the social phenomena. So that is how mapping world has evolved over the years. So starting with 1958 or something, when GIS really came into picture, to now GIS has really evolved. Intelligence is built into the GIS platform. Now we talk about raster and vector. So every data has some kind of data structure behind that. So for the world of GIS, these are two primary data structures which are used to represent the geographical data. One is the vector, which is nothing but a collection of points or lines or some polygons. That is what a vector is. Whereas a raster is a grid representation of your phenomena, or your scene or your map. So where each cell in this grid represents some value, which represents some phenomena. So cell value can be positive or negative, but it definitely represents some phenomena. For example, in this, there are three phenomena: water, grass, and forest, each represented by different color, which means different pixel value behind these cells. So you can take each cell as one pixel. So that is the fine grained thing we are talking about when we talk about raster, when we talk about maps and pictures. Now let's deep further down into vectors and raster. So vector data, as I said, is three things: points, lines, or polygons. So when we get into polygons, and when we increase the dimensions of polygons, which definitely we would when we get into complex mapping mechanism and GIS solutions. So polygon is the base for complex understanding of complex mapping architecture. Whereas raster, as I mentioned, if you just look at the right hand side, so this is a picture of a field in a rural area. If I just clip just a portion of this picture and zoom it in multiple levels, I get something like this, which is representative of a raster. So if you see, this image has a portion of this blue line, which may be a river. There is a brown thing, which may be a shed. There is grass and trees, etc. Here you see this single point of a blue river is represented by multiple cells on the raster. Similarly, brown is represented by multiple shades of brown, where these represent one collective phenomena called the shed. So similarly, if I look at this is a representation of a vector, a shape that is represented in GIS as a vector. Whereas if we have to convert this into raster of multiple levels, this is like several thousand square feet of raster visualization. Then you zoom in a bit, you get this kind of a raster. Then you zoom further at the lowest level, you get this kind of a raster. So these are really the base of GIS mapping. So as I said, raster represents some kind of phenomena, which can be a grassland, forest, road, or the invisible phenomena as well by way of magnitude. So we can we can represent noise level, we can represent percentage of rainfall or temperature in GIS very effectively on our mapping. So that is where raster comes really handy. So one thing like we talk about here, zooming in and zooming in. So for example, if I take a picture, let's say of this grass field over here, a picture representing an area or elevation covering 100 square meter by just 100 cells means that each cell represents 1 square kilometer of the area. So that is how you think like a geographer, you think like a cartographer when you work in the field of GIS, and that is your understanding of geometry, your understanding of the real world mapping into the digital world. Now, here again, so people who use Google Maps, which I think everyone does, would have seen this kind of a picture, and some would have changed the visualization in their map to something like this. Uh, Till now, we may not be aware that we are converting our visualization into something called as a raster. But if you see the amount of information we get out of a raster is much more than we get out of a vector. So vector is just telling us overall structure of the city in the form of several polygons and lines. Whereas raster gives us much more information. It gives us temperature levels within that area. It gives us what kind of a road it is. It gives us what kind of a residential or commercial complexes we are living in. So that is why I just wanted to appreciate the concept of vector versus raster and wanted to present you this kind of a picture. Some more example, the above figure is some examples of vector where you see points, lines, and polygons. This is just colored, but doesn't mean that it is a raster. It is still two-dimensional and it is still vector. And then this is a representation of a raster. This is a map showing some island, Central Park, and Fire Island. Similarly, in a hilly area, what does elevation look like in the world of rasterization? So when you work on some data science problems on geographical data, you come across several times that you just have vector data and you have to convert it to raster. So that kind of interconversion is possible with uh, by way of some methods called geocoding and geolocation conversion, etc. So that is definitely possible, but converting a raster into vector is a complex problem to solve. It is solvable, but it is complex with respect to vector to raster. So something is broken in my slide. I'll just go there. Okay. So as a data scientist or as a data analyst, the first question you would face is, okay, I'm saying that you get the raster data or you get the vector data, but in what format you would get the data? For example, if we are working on a normal data, which is two-dimensional, let's say data of sales figures of a company, we get it in the form of either a JSON or as a CSV, etc. Those don't work in GIS. In GIS, they have their own data formats. So primarily, three data formats work in industry. One is GeoJSON, which is similar to JSON, but standardized format for representing the vector data feature. So it can be edited in a normal text editor. Then we have a shapefile, which is a proprietary data format by a GIS leader, ISRI, Environmental System Research Institute. So they use in their platform shapefiles. Shapefiles is a collection of multiple files which represent the data. Primarily three kind of files: .shp, .shx, and .dbf, which is the metadata behind the shapefile. Then, if you are working with images, the data format you would use is GeoTIFF. So TIFF images either would have embedded location information, or they have a metadata file included with the images called .twf, TFW, which has all the location and spatial information about the image, so that you make sense of the image with respect to the location data. Okay, before jumping into this understanding of GIS, Akash, is there any question that you see?
Yes, Amandeep. There are quite a few questions around
Mhm.
GIS. Let me just pull them up. So the first is, how is a raster image created? And something on similar lines is, what is the basic difference between vector and raster, and does it differ in dimension? I think you answered the difference, but how is a raster image effectively created?
So, raster image creation is again a method within GIS. So, one part of it is your image has to be really high resolution. So, you just can't create a raster out of a three-band image, which is RGB only. So, you have to work on multi-band images. You have to work even on hyperspectral images, which are like very, very high resolution images, and you get from drones or satellites. Then you pass it through your GIS system to rasterize it. So there are methods in geoconversion within the GIS tool. So two prominent GIS tools that I can name is one is ArcGIS by Esri, other is open source called QGIS. So both of these has really good and easy capabilities to convert your regular data into raster data. So I will not just talk about images, but
Mhm.
raster data can be based on your two-dimensional data as well.
Okay. There's one additional question around raster is, how much granularity, I think Mohak is asking this, is how much granularity does raster methodology allow? And this is without getting into fractal related computational issues. I'm not sure what it implies.
So uh, you raise the point. That's a good question. So granularity, as much as you want, is possible in the world of raster. Since I talked about hyperspectral images, so hyperspectral image is your satellite is sending you images which you can zoom into such a minute level that from that image you can look at the smallest possible phenomena like flowing of a river on earth through hills. So all of that you can visualize from that. But yes, it depends on what kind of compute power do you have. So if you have low compute power, then there are methods where you can limit the number of layers to which you want to go deep into your raster images. So it's all about the power of computation, and GIS is compute intensive for sure.
And probably one more question is, how do these images grow? I mean, in size effectively. I'm imagining that these images would be of significantly large size as they have so much of information in them.
Yeah, these are very very heavy images. But when we talk about the artificial intelligence in next few slides, I will touch upon this as to how to compress. So
Okay.
there is always a way to compress the files, because you always don't need these raw images for your daily analysis and modeling, etc. You should,
Yep.
when you work on preparing your data, you should compress the images. Those are to be fed into your model. So uh, maybe good point to talk about that. When we work on deep learning, there are several deep learning architectures available. So
Okay.
each architecture has their own input standard as to what kind of image it would expect. So you have to convert your raster image or a hyperspectral image into that kind of a chip format to pass into that deep learning model to really get value out of that model.
Okay. All right. Good.
Okay,
Let's continue.
sure. So what is GIS? You would see there are several things written. So GIS is, sometimes people mistake this as a visualization tool. Sometimes people mistake it as a tool to create maps. But I would I would call GIS as a system. So coming from a system thinking background, so GIS should be looked at as a system where it does everything related to data for GIS. So it does not say that someone else go and collect the data, someone else go and prepare the data. and then I will do the mapping, etc. No, end-to-end GIS system or a platform is that which collects the data, organizes data, stores, analyzes, and distributes the spatial data. So this distribution comes in the form of either visualization or in the form of your model output that you would build on the GIS data. So we have talked about it a lot, but really for any other MIS system, GIS also talks about data, which is a collection of related facts, basic elements of information, and it talks about information, which is who, what, where, and when question. So uh, you feed in data, you get information inside, but whatever you feed in, whatever similar is you get out. And people who work on modeling and all, they know this term called GIGO, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. So quality of data matters a lot, both for traditional GIS as well as modern Geo AI based solutions. Because if your data is not correct, if your training data is of low quality, you cannot expect your model to perform at 98% performance or a very high F1 score. So that is not possible. You have to get really high quality data. So how does GIS answers some spatial questions? So uh, okay, so GIS, within GIS, the maps which are created are structured layers of various representations of the data. So here I'm showing three kind of data. One is the population data, other is industries data, and other is monitoring wells. So different data sets, but represented on the same map. How this is done? We'll take a look with one of the very naive example that I created. So you can you can feed in this data, get some output by way of either on the screen or print. You analyze the data for making decision and searching for patterns, or you create a model to answer what if questions. So people who are from stats background, if they want to do some A/B testing, that is possible by using the GIS platform. What type of questions can be answered by GIS? My answer, abstract answer, would be any kind of a question. But specifically, if I say, if I want to ask question like, what are the particular features found in a particular area? Maybe I want to see how many rivers are flowing in the northern region of the country, or if I want to understand socially that what are the people, what are the colonies in a particular city that are below poverty line. So we have to define poverty line. GIS would not understand by itself. So where are the colonies which are below poverty line? Or if we want to understand some business related questions, what are the changes occurred over a specific period of time? If I want to see, let's say I'm Big Bazaar. I want to understand how sales across my stores across India are changing over time. GIS can help that. Uh, where do certain conditions apply? So many questions. You frame a question, so it's like any other analytical problem where you framing the question is really hard part, and that applies to GIS as well. That you either start from framing the problem or you either start from collecting the data, but ultimately you have to frame the problem for sure. Some of the applications in both social sector, government sector, or in industry sectors are, as you can see on the slide. So urban planning, management, and policy creation people are using GIS for things like land acquisition, economic development, emergency response. So in the pandemic world we are living right now, GIS is really helping a lot by understanding where it is happening, why it is happening, how it is happening. Uh, Most of you have seen those first maps from John Hopkins University. That was created on the GIS platform by ISRI, ArcGIS platform. So GIS is helping a lot in this situation. So crime analysis. we'll see one use case how GIS is used for crime analysis, crime understanding. Similarly, in environment sciences, I want to understand environmental impact of some phenomena. For example, temperature. What is the impact of climate change on temperature in a particular city or in a particular country? GIS can help here. In businesses, I want to do some demographic analysis. GIS can help. In real estate, I want to do neighborhood land prices, traffic impact analysis, etc. It can help. So one of the technologically very advanced example of impact of GIS on real estate is by way of BIM tools, the business information modeling tool, which like GIS have evolved a lot. And if you have heard of a technology called digital twins, so that is using 3D analysis and GIS application to do architectural modeling of real estate buildings. So that is the level of usage of technology is happening within real estate by which is impacted by GIS. Similarly, in healthcare epidemiology, I have just mentioned. Okay, we are about to get into location intelligence. So, what really is location intelligence? Simply, we have seen location data, and you apply artificial intelligence techniques on that, and you get the world of location intelligence. You want to understand where your customers, competitors, users are, or one great example of how one country is using GIS or location intelligence as a surveillance tool on the enemy country by using satellite imagery is a good example of location intelligence. So I could not get more details for this audience because that is really a secret data. But yeah, that kind of a usage is also happening. Location connects physical world to the digital ecosystem. So we have been talking about this since past more than 20 minutes that GIS helps location intelligence further augments converting your physical world to digital ecosystem. So I just talked about digital twins. That is the great example of converting your physical world to digital ecosystem. Some of the use cases of location intelligence, I want to understand where my network assets are, or for that matter, if I am an Indian Railway, I can use location intelligence to track my moving parts, to track my stationary assets. Where are our customers? So location of the customer, so that you can do some location-based offerings to the customer. For example, telecoms are doing value-added services for segmented customers. So you apply now spatial data on that, you get a spatially enabled segment where now you can more effectively plan your marketing campaigns out there. Where are our potential customers and commercial customers? How I can reach them? So it's a combination of several use cases that you can use. For example, one of the use case I like a lot is where are we vulnerable to competition? So this is like uh, uh, prediction and classification both applied to a single use case, so that you understand and you take the mitigation steps for the upcoming risk that you have. Okay, I think it's logical to stop and see if there are some questions, Akash.
Sure, Mandeep. I was about to jump in. So a quick time check also. We have 30 minutes left.
I think we are
Around
good,
30
yeah.
minutes. Okay. So there are two questions effectively. One is, could you please share a few business applications of ongoing GIS projects which you just picked up on in the last few slides? But somebody just asked that how quickly can these GIS images be generated, and like can they generate it be using a camera or just scanning a live location, and just how costly it is to generate such a data? For example, if I have a business problem and if I want to look at demographics and I have no data, how do I capture it, and what could be the cost around it?
You can capture it using a regular camera, using your phone as well. It is just a matter of preparing your images to be used for GIS purposes. So, which means that you have to enable it for geolocation. So, if let's say I'm clicking a picture within Gurgaon for one of my use case, and I have clicked thousands of pictures, uh, I should do every effort to attach geolocation, or in technical terms we call it as a geocode. So we should geocode those images to be effectively used as geo AI use cases. So there are APIs available where you can enter your pictures into the system, and maybe addresses. They can help you create lat long for each image that you have. So there are tools available, but yes, you have to prepare the data for use within the GeoA platform.
Okay. All right.
Good to
There's
go.
just one. Yeah, there's just one more that just came in. Could you please talk about data availability and procurement? It could be effectively about tied to the GIS data that you said, and how easy it is to get some kind of a geographical information. I know we can click pictures and attach
Yeah.
geocodes, as you said, but
Mhm.
how in general can we acquire more GIS data for my business problem?
Yeah, so specific to business problem, data is something you have to put effort in collecting the data, because there are two things when we talk about data gathering. We gather data either through primary sources or through secondary sources. So uh, as with other use cases, GIS data is also available through secondary sources, both freeware, and you can download data from universities where they are using data for their research purposes. But there are organizations that are building this data. One of the great organization where high quality data, imagery data is available, it's called Planet. So you look for planet.com, and they own a lot of geographical data. And it is said that apart from the government organizations like ISRO, NASA, etc., they are the biggest private organization to have a large number of satellites in the world. So that is one. Then second is I talk about ISRI, the leader in GIS. If you go to arcgisonline.com, you have Sentinel imagery data. You have data set available on ArcGIS Online as well. So there are several places you can get this data, but you have to really understand what data out of that you can use for your use case, because that data is used by thousands of people, so may not be true for you that you can use that data. So you have to be very, very careful in using these data. Of course there are legalities behind this data because of the efforts that are put in collecting this data and preparing this data. So a lot of things to take care, but yes, data is definitely available. If you want to let's say use data for learning purposes, it's easy. You can go to such sites, and I can share some sources with Akash if people are interested, where they can get data for research or learning purposes. So yeah, many sources are available.
All right, great. We can continue. Thank you.
Okay, now we are getting into next segment where we talk about first AI, and then we'll talk about Geo AI and the entire workflow of model building. So AI, we all understand what is AI, but I just want to talk about one thing. Very few people I have seen talking about it. AI is not only software. AI is hardware and software both. So, example. Take example of a robot. Robot is physically a combination of several sensors, controllers, and microcontrollers, etc. That is hardware. But in order to run your robot to do certain tasks, you need some software. So algorithms or other control mechanisms. So whether your robot is based on artificial intelligence or non-artificial intelligence, so through control mechanism, you need some code up behind that. So it's a combination of hardware and software. So in artificial intelligence, we talk about robotics, autonomous agents. We talk about things like computer vision, game AI, reinforcement learning, which is like uh, the area of prescriptive analytics that we talk about. Now, within artificial intelligence, the field of machine learning is what is brain behind artificial intelligence that is implemented using mathematical and statistical methods. There are several frameworks available now. So machine learning itself is not a new field. It dates back to I think 1960s by way of traditional statistical methods. But now it is commercialized, industrialized, and there are several sophisticated platforms available like TensorFlow, PyTorch of the world, MXNet, etc that you can use to build your sophisticated machine learning model. Within machine learning, deep learning is a field that talks about neural networks, which people sometimes say that it's a replica of our brain, how our brain functions, but it's it's not good to say that it's like our brain because the number of neurons in our brain is way more than the biggest deep learning model built till now. So it's not replica of that, but yeah, architecturally we can say that it may be a replica of that because of combination of that neurons and synapses and all that stuff. So deep learning enables machine learning. Machine learning enables artificial intelligence. Just a quick crux of this picture. So combine your machine learning tools with GIS and you get intelligent GIS. So in the middle, you have your GIS platform that is doing some GIS stuff, but it is enabled by computer vision to do some artificial computer vision on the GIS data. And you apply some reinforcement learning on some GIS enabled data to do some prescriptive GIS analysis on your data. So that is how, at a very high level, if I draw a block diagram of a GeoAI platform, this is what it would look like. And since we are living in the world of interconnection, so platform independence is definitely needed. We can have a limited number of GIS platforms only, which are a couple of those in the world right now. So these have to work seamlessly with various AI platforms, not only standalone like TensorFlow, PyTorch, and Scikit-learn, but also on the cloud. How your GIS platform works seamlessly with cloud-enabled artificial intelligence, if you may. So this is another emerging area. What is not shown here is Geo AI on the edge. So how your Geo AI platform does the inferencing on edge devices like your mobile phone, like your drones, like your autonomous vehicles. So that is another emerging area where everyone is going and GIS is not behind. Okay, next we'll talk about some specific examples. When we talk about machine learning, we all understand machine learning comes in various flavors like supervised, unsupervised, reinforcement learning. Within those, we have several categories like regression or classification or clustering. We'll see some of those examples in next few slides where I talk about first prediction. In a layman term, it's estimating unknown from known. So we have some historical data and we're predicting something that may happen in future. So I'm using the word may because prediction or statistics doesn't say that it will for sure happen. There is always a confidence interval attached to it. So that is what prediction is. And applied to GIS, the example is that what is the impact of climate change on local temperature using global climate model data. So someone was asking this data that is GIS enabled. So global climate model data is free data available. You can go and download that for your climate related analysis. So here some of the methods that can be used for solving prediction kind of problems is like empirical Bayesian kriging, aerial interpolation, EBK regression prediction, and there is geographically weighted regression that is being used over here. So all of these regression methods is what you can use. So some people have used SVR also for this, the support vector regression. So because regression is the mechanism to do prediction. Now talking about classification, which is deciding to which class or category some portion of data belongs to. For example, if I'm a telecom, I have demographic data of a million people across North India. If I run the classification algorithm, it should tell me that which of these data belong to the new age kids, or which of these belong to millennials, which of these belong to working class or businessmen. So that is classification 101. A use case, we can use classification methods in GIS to identify or classify the damage done after, let's say, some flood event or a storm event happen. So you feed high resolution, which is hyperspectral or multi-band imagery into your Geo AI platform to do this kind of prediction. It would clearly give you which of these are damaged, which are red, which of these are not damaged. Obviously, you have to label the data because we are talking about classification. So you have to do efforts on labeling the data first, and then do inferencing on unknown data. Clustering is creating multiple chunks of similar kind of a data. So GIS example is if I'm given 50K reports of traffic for 1 hour in LA, and I want to make a decision that where I need to put personnel to control the traffic. So I can do that kind of a clustering and identify areas like this one where traffic is very high between 5 to 6, or this one, or there may be areas like these blue cluster where area is very minimal. I can pull people out of that and move to these high cluster areas. So uh, some of the examples of models that are used for this kind of analysis are multivariate clustering or density-based clustering. Image segmentation is another method that can be effectively used. Now we have talked about clustering, and we can do spatially constrained clustering as well, which is nothing but finding the observations or finding the data based on similarity of values from spatial point of view. For example, clustering of the country based on economic indicators. So you have this kind of a data available in India as well in the US. In India, it's available at data.gov.in. So it is spatially labeled data. So it has locations also. So again, data is freely available for you to learn and experiment. Okay, end-to-end Geo AI lifecycle, Geo AI model lifecycle, it is similar to any other modeling lifecycle that we have seen so far. For example, if we are solving a computer vision related problem, so first we have to have access to the imagery data. Then we have to do the imagery preparation for the model. Okay, this is where you would geocode, you would reduce the size, you would cut chips out of the data so that it is good for the model that you are using. You would do the final training prep of the data over here. You train, you deploy the model, you run the inference. There's a feedback loop, how your model is going, if it needs retraining, etc. And you take business decision or any other decision from the use case that you are building this for. Some of the examples I can share with you for Geo AI application on imagery. So, for example, building footprint analysis. So, if there are architects or planners in this session, they understand the importance of building footprint analysis, where they do the building footprint analysis within the city of their jurisdiction, and they understand how much area is covered by buildings and all. And then they do similar exercise at least once a year so that they understand how much expansion has happened or how buildings have changed over time. So this kind of a use case traditionally is done by surveyors in the field, which takes for the city of, let's say, Bangalore size, it takes anywhere up to maybe a couple of months or 3 months. But if you have a good imagery of Bangalore, uh, there are models available. You can pass it through the model to inference it, and you can get result within half an hour or 1 hour based on the computation power that you have. So that is the kind of examples I'm talking about, that GIS and GeoAI enabled platforms can help you. Another one is this is extreme. So someone had a question that how granular level we can go in imagery. This granular level we can go. This is a model built on satellite imagery to identify cracks in the roads. So in India, we don't care about cracks. We have big potholes. But in US, the municipal corporations are too worried about cracks in the roads, and they have surveyors who go and check the roads for cracks. But this kind of a model can help those departments, government departments, identify the cracks really immediately. So then pipeline encroachment. People in Middle East know that pipelines running through open fields or across countries are vulnerable to encroachment by illegal people, illegal parties. So how can they identify and take action through satellite imagery? That kind of a solutions are also in place and being used by the industry over there. Okay, 10 minutes. Akash, quickly, any question? Otherwise, I'll go ahead.
We have questions. I think you can stretch for 5 more minutes. Let's take them at the end.
Okay,
Okay.
sure. Yeah. Okay, deep learning, we all know neural net based machine learning algorithms. So why it is talk of the town? So I'll take you back to year 2012, where this competition called ImageNet started. So ImageNet is a data set of more than, I think, 1,500 categories of images. uh, those are prepared by a university in the US. So they launch this ImageNet competition every year to understand how computer vision algorithms perform on that data. So their baseline is human error rate on images is 5%, which means that if you present 100 images to me, I would be able to identify 95 out of those images, out of those ImageNet data set. But over the year, you see that starting 2012, the algorithms have advanced so much that after 2015, they have surpassed the human performance as well. The last competition was held in 2017. After that, they stopped. Is when lowest error rate was reported, that is 2.3%. So that is really the exciting point for industry to start using computer vision or deep learning for their business modeling. So just a quick example or a differentiation between machine and deep learning. Both are doing the same thing. You input something, you get some output out of the model. But difference lies what happens in between. In case of machine learning, you are manually doing some feature extraction, you are doing manual classification, etc., all that stuff. But in case of deep learning, all of this is black box. You don't need to do any feature engineering, feature extraction. It does not mean that you should not do. If you do this, you have time and effort. Your model would perform really well. But if you don't do, it will still perform to a decent level. So this part is seen as a black box. Although there is research going on these days where researchers are trying to do some explainable AI. XAI is the field where they want to understand what goes behind the scenes in a deep learning model. So under the hood, what is under the hood? How data is passing through each node through various layers, and what is changing in that data. If I want to interrupt here and see what is the value of data coming from here, explainable AI can help it. Okay, now talk about deep learning. And in when we talk about computer vision application to GIS, common deep learning techniques are divided into two categories. One is object detection, which is nothing but within an image, you identify what all objects are available. For example, in this image, there is a truck, there is a car, there is a traffic light, there is a person, there is a cycle. So it would draw the bounding boxes and tell you that these are the objects available. So this is called the object detection. In GIS, how it is applicable? Finding what is in a satellite, aerial or drone imagery and where, and plotting it on a map can be used for infrastructure mapping, anomaly detection, and feature extraction. So object detection is a useful technique in the GIS industry. The other more advanced, more sophisticated is pixel classification. So here you are just identifying based on a cluster of images. So if you are identifying a car, you are clubbing these pixels into one category called car. But now talk about pixel classification. Each pixel is being classified as belonging to something. For example, in the left image, I pass this image and the algorithm tells me that uh, there are some kind of human sitting over here. There is a kind of table. There are different kind of mugs here, glasses here, flowers here, and all that stuff. So semantic segmentation assigns a label to every pixel in the image, treats multiple objects of the same class as a single entity. That is the key differentiator. So if there are humans, it will tell you that these are humans. It will not tell you that this is John, this is Mary, or this is Rebecca, etc. It will not. What will tell me this is semantic segmentation. So it assigns a label to each pixel and tells you uniquely that what this person is about. So it will say this is person A, person B, person C, this is cup A, cup B, etc. If there are multiple cups of this side, it will differentiate that as well. So this is really the high level of usage of imagery for doing computer vision techniques. In GIS, segmentation can be used whether it is pixel or semantic or instance segmentation. It can be used for use case like land cover classification, or for extracting roads for roads or buildings from satellite imagery that we just saw. So some of the popular deep learning architectures, model architectures that are used for object detection are fast RCNN, mask RCNN, faster RCNN, YOLO. YOLO is primarily used for motion pictures, which is videos. So doing object detection within videos, YOLO is being used. YOLO has now 3 versions, fourth is already in the progress. Then mask RCNN. RetinaNet is really advanced level of object detection algorithm, and it is compute intensive. But if someone asks me that where I would start, given an image, I would start doing object detection, which algorithm should I start first? For example, in case of prediction, if someone asks that, okay, where should I start? The quick answer is OLS, right? So now here, quick answer would be apply SSD, single shot detector. So based on your performance, you can move to other models, but many a times on simple imagery, simple images, SSD helps a lot. Other is segmentation, what all architectures are available. There is a fully convolutional network. There is a encoder decoder networks. There is UNet architecture. Again, in case of segmentation, the first advice is go and apply UNet and see what results are, and then you change it. Then there is a PSP-Net, really advanced network, and it has uh, more than 2 million parameters for a very small image. So that is the kind of complexity is there. Then this is the new one, DeepLab. DeepLab now is V3. So it is a good example of implementation of encoder decoder architecture with inverted pyramid architecture as well. So some of the use cases that were implemented using segmentation, UNet was used for uh, looking at how slums are dwelling in Mumbai, how slums are increasing in Mumbai. Then UNet was used for building footprint analysis or land cover analysis. Okay. Now I get some question that okay, imagery is fine, but can we use regular text data? The answer is yes. The first example is time series data. You can do time series analysis based on neural network, that is LSTM, or using SVR as well, LSTM SVR to understand the forecast for, let's say, temperature for some city or some country. Then this is a great example of unstructured data, and if you heard of information theory, and within that information extraction is one field. So this is an example of using NER, the named entity recognition for information extraction to identify crimes that are happening in the city of Madison. So what happens is police over there has these kind of FIRs or reports where they say that a Red Cliff Drive, which is an address, residents said 3 men, at least 2 of whom were carrying handguns, which is a weapon. So you first have labeled this data out of this report, and then you run NER out of that. Output of NER model is projected on a map for police to understand what does these report look like. Isn't that amazing that you are using text data to visualize on the map so that police can better understand how things are happening and where things are happening. So good example of what, where, when, and why. This is extreme example. LiDARs, the LiDARs are sensor-based cameras that take optical remote sense. So remote sensing is a field of GIS. So it takes optical remote sensing image, which is called the point cloud. So output of LiDAR is a point cloud, and you can apply a model called the point CNN architecture on this point cloud to generate these kind of visuals. So this is generated by a point cloud, of course, using some 3D software, but this is how it can be used. So digital twins, when they use AI techniques, they are using models on point cloud data. Quickly, deep learning workflow we have seen already. I don't think we need to talk a lot about that. You prepare the data, you train your model, you inference on the top of your model. Just quick example. So this is one use case experiment done in Australia where electric wires through poles are running through forests and trees, etc., which are hazard to the greenery, hazard to the forest, and it got attention after Amazon fire late last year. So they wanted to understand where are these wires which are running through trees, or where trees are touching these wires, so that they can do something about that. So one way again is do a manual survey and understand where these are. Other is take imagery and take images like this and start to understand where these wires are. If you see that these are outputs of the model in a progressive way, point CNN model applied on this kind of a data set. So this is like first model. It has missed identifying some of the wires. There are some breaks out here. Further training was done. It identified it in a better way, but there were some false positives like this one. This is not a wire. This is a road. Or this one. This was really great, but it again had some true negatives. So here is a wire going, but since there is a building, model thought that this is a wall of the building, so it missed identifying this. But this is great. This is output from a model that was trained in one country. It was trained on a data from Netherlands and applied on similar data or similar kind of data in Australia. So it has very beautifully identified wires going through the trees like this. So here you see wires are going under the trees, but leaves are covering that. It has identified very clearly over here. It has done some object detection and segmentation as well, something like this over here. So this is geo-enabled. So people can go and take a look at that and directly go there. So this is the kind of geo AI use cases that are being used in the industry. Okay, I'm done. Over about 2 minutes. Sorry for that. Akash, open for questions.
Yep. Let's do some questions. I think you have compressed a very large semester worth of topic into an hour, which is great. Let's take a few of them, some of the really interesting ones. So there's a question about how GIS is used in space exploration and urban planning and smart cities, predominantly in India. ISRO, smart city planning. Do you have any experience or any thoughts on that?
So in India, Government of India has an initiative or an organization called the Smart City Mission that is led by an IS officer by the name Mr. Kunal Kumar. I'm taking his name because I'm working on a project with him right now for climate smart cities. So they are using GIS for city monitoring. So if you read the news about Niti Aayog in Government of India, so they have launched the Urban Observatory for smart cities. So Government of India is working on 100 smart cities in India, and Urban Observatory would help in real-time monitoring of the smart cities from various perspectives, from traffic, from garbage, from multiple dimensions. So this would be like a control center 24 by 7 monitored through sensors and GIS enabled artificial intelligence solutions. So yes, that is a work in progress. The second question was how it is being used in space. I have little idea about that, but I would like to explore that. I'm sorry, I don't have an idea how. I'm sure ISRO is using, NASA is using, but how
Okay.
they are using, I don't have an idea.
There are questions. I think let's take the last question, and there is also the request for sharing the data, the website that you mentioned that
Sure.
that has public data. So if you can
Mhm.
share it with me, we'll pass on to the audience. So the last question
I
let's
agree.
do is little bit on the agriculture aspect, and if somebody is interested to pursue their career in GIS, how could they do that? And because this seems to be a very vast domain in itself.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a really vast domain. So there are two ways you work on GIS projects. Okay, let me take a step back. So in machine learning world, there are two kind of profiles. One is machine learning engineer who uses the models already built for business application. Then there is a data scientist who is creating a new algorithm either from scratch by using mathematical or statistical modeling, or by using multiple models and ensemble them into a really new model for a particular use case. So similarly, so in this case, you have different skill sets. For data machine learning engineer, you don't need to know a lot of statistics mathematics. So you need to understand some of the frameworks like TensorFlow, PyTorch, or Python, etc., and do modelings based on the APIs provided by these frameworks. But for data scientist, he need to be really strong on mathematics. He need to be strong on statistics and information modeling. Similarly, in GIS, you can either work as a GIS machine learning engineer, or you can work as a GIS analyst. So to work as a GIS analyst, you need to understand GIS in and out. You need to understand geography. If you are working as a GIS machine learning scientist, then you need to understand math, especially geometry aspect of mathematics. So because GIS talks a lot about line, point, and polygon, so it helps if you understand those aspects. So there are different paths in India. There are several colleges that offer geoinformatics kind of courses. Best one I think is in Dehradun, IIRS, where they offer postgraduate and graduate degree courses over there. And TERI in Delhi is also offering some of those.
All right, that's great. I think thank you, Amandeep, for the insightful session and answering the questions. It was pleasure having you and having you take us through the world of GIS. Extremely complex and extremely exciting too. I think the world is going to see more of this because we will need more location-based information as the pandemic grows. So thank you
Absolutely.
for your time again. Sid, I see that you are there back on live, so that's my cue, I believe. Over to you.
To do the usual. Thanks,
Yeah.
Akash. And thank you, Amandeep. As Akash mentioned, semester worth course, cramped in a deck, but nevertheless, the most beautiful presentation so far. Okay.
Thank you
And
so much. Thank you.
I look forward to keeping in touch with you. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And really, appreciate you taking the time,
Thank you.
for a
Thank
session,
you,
for
Akash.
a
Yeah.
session with us.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Sid
much,
and
Amandeep.
Akash.